All right, we're back in our Mishnah study. Good to see everybody, and I hope you have your Mishnah Scholar caps on, because we're going to jump right into a good example of something I mentioned last time, which is that the Mishnah assumes you know a lot about Jewish law already. It does not define its terms. It assumes that you know those terms, and we'll see that we'll see it clearly in just a second. I did want to go over and review what we did last time. We studied two Mishnayot last time. This one from Bava Batra about property rights and property responsibilities and how far you have to distance certain things from your neighbor's property because they could be either corrosive or somehow undermine the foundation of your neighbor's structures. And we talked a little bit about the balance between recognizing a person's right to do what they want on their property and recognizing that they can't do everything they want on their property, and that is a delicate line, and that the rabbis like measurements. They gave a specific measurement for a minimum, 3 tefachim, and I suggested that was not a very big measurement, and that it kind of fell on the side of recognizing you have some responsibility, but also ensuring your rights pretty significantly. We also studied this, which is the first Mishnah in the whole Mishnah, and well known because of that, about the appropriate time frame for reciting the Shema in the evening. And we had 3 different opinions. One that was a narrow time frame, one that was slightly longer until midnight, and one that was all the way until dawn. And then we established a basic principle based on that, which was that any time the sages say until midnight, they really mean all night long. And they only said until midnight in order to buffer you from messing up and keeping you far from crossing the line. But that if a mitzvah is supposed to be done at night, halacha lema'aseh, practically speaking, you can do it all night, anytime within the nighttime. And the same is true pretty much for daytime mitzvot. If something is supposed to be done during the daytime, it can be done anytime during the day, even though there are times that are specified for many of those things. Okay, let's move ahead here. This is from Mishnah Shabbat. We've seen other Mishnayot in Shabbat, and I pointed out that a lot of the Mishnayot in Shabbat are very technical. They're less concerned with a Hasidic kind of spirituality and more concerned with the mechanics and the technologies outlined in many of the different labors that are prohibited on Shabbat. One of the things that you are not allowed to do on Shabbat, and maybe we should talk about this more generally before we jump in. One of the major categories that many people are kind of unaware of, I think, is tiltul b'Shabbat, carrying on Shabbat. Broadly speaking, carrying things is heavily restricted on Shabbat, especially moving things from one place to another. Changing a thing's location is something you're not supposed to do. If something is outside, you're not supposed to pick it up and carry it to bring it inside, and vice versa. You're not supposed to move things from private domain, your property, your apartment, your house, to the public domain. Go out into the world. If something is here, it stays here. If something is there, it stays there. And I happen to think there's a very deep spirituality to that. It's part of the acceptance of the world on Shabbat. The world is perfect today. Everything is right where it's supposed to be. 6 days a week, if that rock is in the way, I can pick it up and move it. In fact, I will pick it up and move it. That's what we're supposed to do. That's human industry. You see something, it needs to be fixed. You have a road, needs to go through, you move the rock. But on Shabbat, we accept the world as perfect the way it is, and exercise in acceptance. So I'm not going to move that rock. And in fact, things that you're not supposed to move, you're not really even supposed to touch them. Things that are asur on Shabbat, that are prohibited on Shabbat, are muktzah. Have you heard that word, muktzah? Muktzah literally means something that's outside of, beyond. And so muktzah means things that you're not supposed to touch on Shabbat. Like, for example, money. You're not allowed to spend money on Shabbat. So you shouldn't handle money on Shabbat. Money is muktzah. Now, by handling it, I'm not spending it, but I haven't broken Shabbat by picking up a quarter, but I'm not supposed to pick up the quarter. Matches, candles, garbage, rocks, things that are not a part of Shabbat, you don't handle them or carry them on Shabbat. If you take this seriously, it's very hard. And especially in the modern world where we move around a lot more. In the old days, if you wanted to leave your home and your little farm area, you had to go fairly far away. Even in a town, the town wouldn't have been that big. Now, though, for me to go to synagogue, I have to take my keys, I have to take my wallet, an umbrella. I mean, those are just things you have with you all the time. We have pockets. You have to check your pockets. You could have something accidentally in your pockets. In fact, there's a whole development of the custom of checking pockets rather than just leaving your little purse if you had a little coin purse, right? Because old clothes didn't have pockets. So even a simple technology like a pocket has its impact and influence on Shabbat. Okay, so no muktzah, no carrying. Okay, now, practically speaking, within your house, you can move things around. You can take a book from one table in your house, move it to another table. And the laws of muktzah and the laws of moving get kind of complicated, as we'll see. Because what, for example, do you do if there's matches on a tray and you want to move the tray? Now, can you move the tray? Because moving the tray is moving the matches. You're not supposed to carry the matches on Shabbat. They're muktzah. You're supposed to, right? How about, can you carry them out into your yard?
Isn't this why we have Eruvs?
Yes, that's the part of the Eruv, is it extends, it blurs the boundary of your private property and makes a larger area that would normally be considered public, a legally fictional semi-private area. Okay, let's look at this Mishnah. This is the first Mishnah in the 21st chapter of Masechet Shabbat. Notel Adam et beno v'ha'even biyado. A man may lift up his child, carry his child, with a stone in its hand. So your child is holding something muktzah. Can you carry your child on Shabbat? You're allowed to carry your child on Shabbat. But what if your child has something, now you are carrying something asur, something that you're not supposed to be carrying. The Mishnah here grants you permission, is lenient. A man may lift up his child with the stone in his hand. Also, a hamper, a basket, wherein there is a stone. Now, the Talmud will elaborate that there has to be something else in the basket. In other words, you have to have something that's, you have to be carrying something permissible along with the thing that's impermissible to carry. And the leniency here is that the presence of something muktzah, a couple of quarters on the tray, does not prevent you from moving that container, so long as there's other, you're moving it for some other reason too. Otherwise, the container is really a part of the muktzah thing. It's just a base. Because then you could just, slide a tray under anything, carry it anywhere you want. I'm not carrying it, I'm just holding the tray. See, they anticipate sometimes human nature and how it will find ways around things. And believe me, that's how Jews operate. Well, I'm moving the table and the table has the tray and the tray has the candlesticks. So I'm really not moving the candlesticks because there's two, what if there's two levels? Right? This is how people's minds work, is they look for ways around obligation and rules. But here they seem to be lenient. Not just a child with a stone in its hand, a baby with something muktzah, but also a hamper. I'm trying to think of a good modern example. I'll come up with one soon. And they're going to extend this principle to carrying permissible and unpermissible foods. Okay, don't worry too much if you don't get this next piece quite. It's a little bit bleary-eyed confusing, but hold on. An unclean offering, truma, may be moved with clean, with non-consecrated things. There are three categories of produce, of grain produce, that are being referenced here. One is truma, only permissible for Kohanim. It's the Kohen's food. It's taxes collected out of your produce for the Kohanim, and you are not allowed to eat it as a regular old person, an Israelite. And since you are not allowed to eat it, you are not allowed to carry it on Shabbat. Truma is asur letaltel b'Shabbat, to carry on Shabbat. But you can carry non-kosher consecrated, non-truma food together with the consecrated and with this other kind of food that Rabbi Yehuda introduces explicitly, which is the midameh. It's truma and regular grain that are mixed together. And you don't know exactly how much or whatnot. And there's a whole other subset of rules for grain, the status of which is uncertain. Which honestly, I mean, it's like mathematics. Kohanim are allowed to substitute their full truma for that which is mixed in unknown quantities. A certain quantity of truma doesn't make it truma, but a certain amount does. It's a whole set. All I really want you to understand is that they're extending the leniency about carrying, not just to inanimate things, but also to truma. In other words, they're establishing a relatively broad leniency around some parts of muktzah. And Rabbi Yehuda extends that so long as it meets a certain proportion, 1 to 100, which the Talmud will explain and establish why it's 1 in 100. Was that mostly clear? Here's a couple of modern day examples, because I like us to use these things to get into the mindset, the mind frame of these rabbis, and then to try to connect it with something more meaningful, right? Relevant. I don't always care if something. I don't always care if something is relevant, but I want it to at least be meaningful. And honestly, this kind of falls flat on me. But there's some practical considerations, like how do you take your keys? Right? You got to have your keys. Keys are muktzah, for sure. But you got to have them. You can't leave your house wide open. That's foolish. And we're not asked to do things that are dangerous and foolish. 1 second, Barbara, I'll get you. Some people will wear their keys. Right now, it's not key. It's part of my clothing. It's attached to me as my clothing. And therefore, if it's clothing, I can have it. Or they'll take only their house key, take all the other keys off on Erev Shabbat, so that all they have is their house key. Well, do you carry ID? What about ID? You got to have a wallet. You can't leave your house without a wallet and ID. That's not good. You can't do that. I don't do that ever. I mean, I got a checklist, right? In fact, I have a $20 bill in my wallet. Always. I have for a million years. Somewhere in my old days, someone said, you put a $20 bill in there, just keep it in there. You won't believe how many times you need a 20 and you don't have any money. And that was all back before everything, is credit. Who carries cash? But back then, I still, right now, I bet if I had my wallet in my pocket, there'd be a $20 bill. So can I put that in my pocket on Shabbat? I'm not really, am I carrying that $20? Kind of, but not really. Where's my mind, right? To me, a lot of it has to do with the mind. The person carrying the kid, their mind is,
hopefully on the
I'm
kid.
carrying the kid. They're not, the kid is not a vehicle to carry the rock, right? I mean, that's not where people's minds are. I put the wallet there because it's basically unsafe for a person in a city where I live, in the way I live, to go out in the world without ID. You have to have it. It's just not right. You just don't do it. So I'm gonna carry it. Now, do I have to take that 20 out? I mean, I can't have $20 in my pocket, just $20, because then I'm carrying $20. But now I'm carrying a wallet. It's really the ID that I'm carrying. It's safety, security, it's well-being, it's, prevention is better than cure. But what about that? What about the key? What about the little pocket knife card that I have that slides into my wallet, that little Swiss Army pocket card? I never take those things out of my wallet. They're always in there. Am I carrying those things on Shabbat? Or I'm carrying the wallet and they happen to be in it. There are other permissible things that are in there. Some people do ask their kids to carry stuff for them.
Oh, God.
Yossi, will you hold this while I carry you to shul? I know people who do stuff like that, because that's what it says, right? It says you can do that. So, yes. Okay. Any questions or other things? Yeah, Barbara, I said I was going to get to you. Yeah.
I know you forgot me and I'm upset, but anyway.
No.
So first I want to make a comment that you won't appreciate, and that is if 30 years ago $20 was enough, don't you think you ought to up it to 100 now?
I really should. You are 100% right.
My question though, you did mention to start us off the importance of measurements that keeps getting repeated.
Right.
And one of the measurements they talk about here is in the proportion of 1 to 100. But they don't mention, are they talking volume? Are they talking weight? I know a lot about carrying rocks around. And if I'm carrying a rock in a basket and I throw a Kleenex over it, I might need the Kleenex because I'm sneezing that day. And that's my valuable piece of, I don't know whether Kleenexes are acceptable or not. But do they mean volume or do they mean weight?
Excellent question. In this case, the 1 in 100, 1 to 100 is a reference to the medameh, the combined grains of uncertain dedication status. And so we're talking about barley grain, right? Wheat or barley grain, something like that. My understanding is their measurement for things like that was a volume measurement, like right? There's a basket that's a certain size, and that's a basket full that much, right? A cup of dry measure is a volume, not weight measure. So here I think it's volume of dry goods, dry volume.
I thought it was weight because we're talking about 1 grain as opposed to 100 grains. But, if it's volume, it's a different story, whether I have to carry 1 or 100 Kleenexes.
Well, the issue there is if you know that the truma is less than 1 in 100, you can eat it. You still don't know how much it is. And he's saying you can carry it on Shabbat, right? That's his point. So like, it's not ideal if you could substitute it out, blah, blah, blah. But if you know that it's a tiny, tiny amount, really small amount, then, all right, somebody's little bit fell in, no big deal. Yeah, Margaret.
Okay, so I understand all this kind of legalistic stuff about, how big and how little and this and that and the other thing. And I've read, some of the Talmud and when it goes into even more detail about some of these things. But from a spiritual point of view, why should I do this? What's this about? Why should I take this seriously and incorporate it into my life?
It's a very good question, and I could answer it in differently than I'm going to, and mean it. Like I could say, well, maybe you shouldn't, right? I could make a case for that the details drown the essence. I'll tell you a funny story. My first year in rabbinical school, we're studying an issue of muktzah in first year Talmud class. And I said something about, I said, you know, I said something like, it seems to me like muktzah is, you'd have to be stupid. Like, I'm not going to use the thing just because I have it in my hand. Like, doesn't that presume that the person is just stupid? Like, this is dumb, right? Muktzah's dumb. You have to be in, you know, like, I know not to spend money. I'm not gonna like accidentally trip into spending money, you know, like that. What kind of stupidness is that? Just take the money, move it over, like who cares? And the teacher made the following case. Ruth Fagan, what's her name? She said, it has to do with awareness of the world around you. A very heightened, very high level of awareness, and a recognition that what you take into your hand, you take into your mind as well. That there is a direct connection between what you touch and who you are. And so that awareness, a deep awareness that each and every contact, that things can affect you by holding them. And I think we know that's true, like people who have a favorite mug and they hold it and it makes them feel a certain way, a blankie, right? I mean, there's a certain truth to that. And that it's one thing to say, I won't spend money. But then it's sort of I see it as sort of the monastic spirit. And I mean that positively. But I'm going to not even encounter money today. I don't even want to see it. And if I can organize the world in such a way that 1 out of 7 days, I'm physically separated even from things that are not holy in Shabbat, that will deepen my Shabbat experience. Now, that's the hypothesis. Whether that is true, I think depends on A, the person and their demeanor. I really think that's part of it. And B, whether you cross the line into ridiculous. That it's not hard to cross that line. It's easy to become ridiculous in your level of punctiliousness, of pedantry. It's easy to write a 400-page book on the halachot of sending mishloach manot on Purim. But it's ridiculous also to do so. It's a gigantic waste of energy and time. So that, I think, to the extent that creating a physical and spiritual experience that's cultivated and curated in that way does help you, you should cultivate and curate it. And yes, it's like taking your phone and putting it in the drawer, right? Oh, well, I'll just have it with me. Don't have it with you. If you bring, I bring my phone into shul because I have a security app that I use, and I consider this an essential tool of my trade. But I don't use it on Shabbat. The app is on, and if somebody had a heart attack, I could get the ambulance faster than anybody. So that kind of thing. But when I go do a funeral, for example, I leave my phone in the car. I don't just turn down the volume. I don't want it in my hands. It is a distraction. I am aware of it. And so I leave it in the car, not just as an act of good rabbinics and white coat behavior to pay attention to the family, which it is, but for me, I need to be whole and present. And if I feel that, bzz, bzz, in my jacket pocket, they'll never know, but I'll know. I won't be there wholly, and I want to be with them. So that level of spirituality, and for that, I treat some things as muktzah. So yes and no, and at the same time, I really have come to the point where all that pedantry and extra mishagas, I'm like, God, if that helps you, not, knock yourself out. But if it doesn't, make a simpler Pesach. Yeah.
Okay, that was
yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
Good. Mickey, did you have your hand up too?
Yes, and this may be somewhat off the subject, but and not necessarily in the United States yet, but where you are required to have identification with you at all times in Europe and other countries, does the law of the land take precedence?
Generally speaking, yes. The law of the land does take precedent. Some of those laws sometimes have exemptions, religious exemptions, sometimes, things like that. But sometimes not. For example, I can't slaughter animals in my backyard and claim, well, it's kosher. You can't do that. I can't do that. No, there's rules about where you can and cannot slaughter animals, and I have to follow them. My religion does not exempt me from public health rules. Right. It gets a little complicated with, like, there are places in Europe where you're not allowed to have like head coverings in public school, or so, like, you can't wear a kippah in public school. And it's problematic, very problematic, from my point of view. I get it. Every right and freedom and expression. It would no. Here's what I want to say. Social order would always be easier if we curtailed rights and freedoms. That's self-evident, right? It's much easier to control things if you don't have to worry about stepping on people's toes. Oh, sorry, nope, can't do that. Problem solved. Of course, like, that is not problem solved, that's problem. So the justification of, yes, but it's better for the social order, is, you have to make that case. That's not a case in and of itself, because that's always the case. It's always true. Well, then let's restrict voting rights. I could make a darn good case for the improvement of the social order. Just look who our last president was. That's what voting allowed. Talk about dangerous rights. To give the people the right to vote is dangerous. They might elect a madman. Dangerous. Much more dangerous than, dirty movies. Yeah. So, but that's not an argument. My point is, I'm saying that's not a good argument. So I think it's tough. I think it's especially tough when it comes to issues like health and public health, because then it really is one person, you're swinging your arm real close to that other person. We talked about that last week, where rights and responsibilities are yins and yangs, and they really are. And there's a reason why those issues are difficult even today, is because they are difficult. Balancing those things is difficult. Yeah, good question. All right, I want to move on a little bit, okay? Excellent conversation. See how important learning about muktzah and carrying on Shabbat is? Really helps you think better. Okay, here we go. Mishnah Ta'anit. What's a Ta'anit? A Ta'anit is a fast. So this Masechet deals with the laws of fasting. And here in the 3rd chapter of Ta'anit, we're going to discuss what are called the Bet, Hey, Bet fasts. Bet is the 2nd Hebrew letter, Hey is the 5th Hebrew letter, Bet. And it refers to days of the week. That means Monday and Thursday and Monday. And there was a tradition of declaring public fasts in order to pray for rain. And they would do a series of public fasts. You would fast Monday, Thursday, Monday. Right? I'd fast today, Monday, this coming Thursday, and then the following Monday. Everybody fasts during the day on those 3 days as a communal theurgy, effort to sway the heavens and have it rain. So this Mishnah is dealing with that fast. The order of these fasts applies only when the first fructifying rains do not fall. Okay, farmers distinguish between kinds of rain. There's little drizzle that doesn't really wet the ground and cause fructification, right? Cause things to flower and make fruit. And then there's the rain that does, right? That's the rain you need. You don't need little drizzly, sprinkly rain. You need rain that, provides enough. So we don't start these fasts. We don't resort to this measure of public declaration of communal fasting unless we've missed the time of the first real serious rains. So you don't immediately declare this fast. Like, all right, it hasn't rained yet, and it would be nice. But once there's the time when these rains really have to come has arrived, then we can declare these fasts, right? Is this, my question, right? Is this a stringency, a narrowing of the law, or a widening leniency of the law?
Because it says only, I would say it's a leniency.
So the 3 days of fasting only applies, we only do that if the first rains have not descended.
And I believe there's probably some range during which those first rains are expected or supposed to descend or to fall. And so you would say, no, we're not there yet. No, we're, the time hasn't come. So
Right,
we haven't
okay.
missed it yet. That's my argument.
I think, though, that's an argument for stringency.
No,
in other words,
that gives you, if it doesn't rain by April 1st, well, maybe it should have been April 15th.
I see. Interesting. I have been assuming it's a stricter position, meaning I want to declare a public fast earlier than this. I want to declare a public fast March 1st, but I have to wait till April 1st. It's the Mishnah is not allowing me to declare that fast. But to your point, it's really a middle position. In other words, it could say you have to wait until later. And you're saying, no, it's allowing you even, you don't have to wait till April 15th. You can go on April 1st. And I'm saying, it's requiring you to wait till April 1st, but not April 15th. In other words, it's that middle area. It's kind of a in between. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, but if we're allowed to go to the next part, then it says you have to wait till the plants start dying off. And
so
I don't know that it's always scientifically true that every season starts. I mean, when we say March 21st is the beginning of spring, then immediately I want warmer temperatures and prettier weather and all, and it doesn't happen that way. And it certainly doesn't happen that way on a steady yearly basis.
What is the order of things? Which comes first? Do the fruiting rains come first, or sprouts degenerate?
The rain
Time-wise.
first.
Right, like these are the sprouts degenerating is a later, like I want to say, it's terribly confusing to get the timeline straight. I want to say, I want to declare the fasts relatively early. But I can't until the general time period for those rains has passed. Once that's come, I can declare. But if somewhere in that time frame the sprouts start to degenerate, like things start to actually dry and die, I don't have to wait for a certain date and certain season to come. I can immediately declare the alarm and institute fasting. Like sprouts degenerating is a worsening of the situation. It's one thing that the rains haven't come yet. It's another thing that things are getting brown. And then we open it up. You can declare, boom, immediately. As soon as that happens, you don't have to wait. The urgency is right there. Here's my question. Either way, really, why limit the time at all? Why declare that you can't, why have it that you can't make public fasting anytime you want?
Because no, thank you, I don't want to participate.
Yes, it is burdensome, right? Right. I mean, that is part of it. Is you're hanging your hat on everybody doing this, but it's a burden, and many people might not do it. And 3 days no eating is asking a lot of people.
When you first said, which is the more lenient, I took it to say, when do you have to fast? Then no, this is more lenient because I won't have to fast.
Right. This is when can the town council declare everyone has to fast? Right. It's like muster. It's like, okay, we're declaring a public emergency. And now, so you don't want people declaring too early. Right? Maybe it'll rain. Like, don't waste the goodwill of the people. People might not fast. If the season has come and it's really urgent, and now we're desperate, well, let's, I don't mean this belittlingly, but let's do a rain dance. And And if I can see that it's urgent, then I mean, sound the alarm right now and get everybody on board. Because when it's urgent, you need people to be on board. We've seen this in our own public health crisis recently. You have to be careful about what you ask people to do, because when you really need them to do something, they have to do it. So you can't ask them to do it unless you really need them to do it. But what if you do really need them to do it? Right? It's a very delicate balance here between declaring emergency and not declaring. When do you do it? When is urgent enough? And if you look at the other two examples here, we also declare this set of fasts immediately if there is an interval of 40 days between each rain.
I can't hear you. Okay.
And because that's a general plague on the land.
Oh, okay.
It's just, once it's supposed to rain, it's got to rain all the time, or at least regularly. And if it doesn't, we got to fast again. The community harvest is at risk here. Now, the theology here is problematic, I think, let's just say, right? Like, this is, the assumption here is that if a community fasts on 3 days over the course of 8 days, that it will rain. I don't know about you, but that's problematic for me.
Well, suppose it doesn't.
Right. I don't think that is what makes it rain.
Well, it must happen often enough that over the years, people kept doing it.
Well, or it wasn't really about that as much as it was about alleviating people's worry, giving them something to do, reserving food, because we might not get as big a harvest. And if it has the added benefit of swaying God's hand, we won't complain about that. Now, or maybe that's me trying to be more comfortable with this Mishnah, when the rabbis may very well have believed that you can fast your way to effective rain. Yeah, Barbara.
To go back to your idea of giving modern examples, I've seen cases where people, where a bad event has happened, and religious people say, we all need to light, or more people need to light Shabbos candles this week, or more people need to do this observance or that observance. And what you said just made sense. It gives people something to do. It makes them feel like they're being productive. And well, lighting Shabbos candles doesn't help in terms of adding food, is the same way that, no rain, no food, no plants, and,
Right.
fasting helps save that. But we actually have modern examples of seeing that kind of behavior.
Yes, and look, there's lighting Shabbos candles is not harmful, right? I mean, like, what, even if it doesn't do anything, it does something. It adds Shabbos. More people lighting Shabbos candles can't be a bad thing, right? That's certainly a good thing. My critique of campaigns like that is they fail on their own measurements. More Jews putting on tefillin has not brought Mashiach closer. How about that? Is it nice that more Jews put on tefillin? Yeah, it is. But the motivation behind the effort to get people to light Shabbos candles, check their mezuzahs, put on tefillin is more theological than that. And on
That's
that
the-
level, it's a, you know, it's as good as fasting for rain.
That's the stated motivation. Is there another motivation behind it? When we're talking about everybody, you know, do 6 more mitzvot and Mashiach will come. Is this all, are we also getting into political stuff?
Yeah, sure. I think bordering on that, and I'm okay being critical of theology. You know, like I think everybody's allowed to believe what they want, but I'm also allowed to be, you know, be critical of theologies which can mislead. You're not, you know, like, and which do not meet a seichel test, an intelligence test. The notion that an unkosher mezuzah caused a catastrophe is patently offensive. That's not just someone's theology. That's a deeply offensive theology to me. Maybe not to others. That's fine. That's cool. Light more Shabbos candles. I love that. That's not offensive. You believe it will bring Mashiach closer. That's not offensive. I don't think it is working, but I'm not offended by it. But the tragedy is made by non-kosher mezuzahs. Check your mezuzah lest you be, you know, stricken. Ooh. So I'm willing to draw those lines, and by the way, my own theology, you can critique my own theology too. I have, you know, mine is as flawed as anybody's. Yeah, Mickey.
You know, when you talk about the fasting during those 8 days, the 3 times during those 8 days, you have defined a time period. We don't know that lighting candles is not gonna bring the Mashiach. We don't know that the tefillin. So things that aren't time limited, it's just as easy to believe that in the future that can happen.
Yes, I totally hear what you're saying. My only critique of that, Mickey, is like, again, more people putting on tefillin, you know, is good. I'm not saying it's not good. It's good. But nobody has unlimited time and resource. And so we all must choose which things we will put our spiritual energy into to bring about the spiritual revolution of Mashiach. And getting a stranger to put on tefillin on the street may or may not be the best use of our limited time and resource.
But you don't know.
I don't. You're right. I don't.
The rain having to be within a certain period of time.
Right.
I think it's harder to.
Correct. That's right. It has to rain now. Like I can wait a millennium for Mashiach to come. I've been waiting for several already. But I can't wait a millennium for it to rain. Right. I need it to rain now. Or, you know, we won't just starve spiritually, we will starve. Yeah. Can we do one more? I want to do one more. Yeah, good. I'm having a lot of fun. These are great, awesome discussions. I hope you're not taking anything I'm saying as being, it's just me bantering and sparring with a group that I trust. So I hope you trust me in that way too. Okay, here we go. This one is from Psachim, which obviously deals with Pesach. Much of it deals with the sacrifices of Pesach, But the 10th chapter of Psachim deals with the Seder. And it is, it's the source of much of our Seder, because of course, the Pesach Seder is not described in the Torah. Moshe does not, have a Seder plate and read from a Haggadah and ask the kids questions and 4 cups of wine. So where do all those customs come from? Well, they come in great measure from the Mishnah. The rabbis established the Seder as a way, their way of telling the story and fulfilling that mitzvah. So in Psachim chapter 10, on the eve of Passover, Arvei Psachim, so this is the day before Passover, meaning that night will be the first Seder. On the eve of Passover, from close to the time of the afternoon offering, meaning right next to the time of the mincha offering, no one must eat until nightfall. Okay, so from roughly 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the eve of Passover, you are not supposed to eat anything. Even the poorest person amongst the Jewish people must not eat on that night of Passover until they recline at the Seder, meaning to eat, recline, meaning to eat at the Seder. That's a pretty remarkable statement right there. No eating from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until you make your first recline at the Seder table, kiddush. And then green vegetables, and then matzah. That's, if you don't start until 7 or 8 o'clock, that's like a 6-hour stretch of no eating. That's a long time to say no eating. Why no eating? Before the Seder. No eating before the Seder because you're supposed to eat the matzah hungry. B'te'ava, with, right? You're supposed to be hungry when you eat the matzah. And they say even the poorest person who may only be eating once a day, I think that's the gist of this, right? Is like, some people don't have the luxury of choosing when they eat. Like if you have food, you eat it. And they're saying no. This is super important. And even the poorest person has to forego food during that time for stretch in order to have this experience when they recline at the Seder table on Seder night, to eat the matzah as if they were slaves leaving Egypt, hungry. It's that important to show up on that night in the right frame of mind to fulfill that mitzvah. And you have to drink 4 cups of wine, even if you have to do it by taking charity. Right, which usually wine would be the kind of thing that is like, this is a luxury thing. This is not essential, for your sustenance. So why would I, indenture myself to the public trust when I don't have to, But here you have to have 4 cups of wine, even if the poorest person has to drink 4 cups of wine. This is, I would say, this is strict, right? It even sounds, it feels strict. You may not until you do. From this time until this time, you can't. And even the poorest person has to, right? It's that kind of gist. And it's no surprise to me that this is about Passover, right? You have to show up for Passover. And you have to have the slave experience, the matzah. You have to eat matzah. And you have to eat it not as food only, right? It's a symbolic gesture. You have to eat this matzah with the right frame of mind. And you have to live like a free man, even if you're not, right? Even if you're so deeply impoverished that you're not really free, as it were. On Seder night, you have to drink like you're a free man. 4 cups of wine, celebrate. You have to reenact through these foods this stuff. These are the core experiences of the Passover Seder. And there's a number of things about the Seder that are kind of really strict, like and I've always said it's the family reunion. It's the way you know you're in the family is you come to the family reunion. If you're never at the family reunion ever, you're not in the family, even if you think you are. Because, the family moved on, right? If you're still in Egypt, right? What do we say about the wicked child? He would still be in Egypt. Because it's sort of true. There's a really, right? If you had blown off the Exodus and you had been like, I don't care about all this stuff, whatever, God's not going to save us, you and your descendants would still be slaves in Egypt. If you miss the train, you miss the train. So essential to being a Jewish person is it to connect with the Exodus experience in this way that we impose these hardships, really, a financial hardship and a physical hardship on people to make sure that they do this. What do you think? No? All right. I thought I sensed some grimaces earlier in there.
No, I think yes. I think you articulated things very well, and I don't know that there's anything to add.
Yeah, I think it's a very strong way to start out the chapter, and as they lay out the whole of the Passover Seder experience, they want you to go through each of these experiences. And in some ways, a Mishnah like this is kind of describing an ideal. This is what they do. It's phrased that way. On this eve, they eat this, and on this, they do that. In other words, the ideal community of people will live and behave this way. Rather than being prescriptive necessarily, I think what they're really trying to do is to be descriptive of what the world would look like if it lived according to the Mishnah. It would be a world in which all people approached the Seder this way, and all people had this experience on Passover night. Any other questions?
No, but I found out our bright idea was wrong. We started adding hors d'oeuvres at the beginning. while we're- and,
But not before you make kiddush, right?
no, during the service, so
Right.
people would not be so restless. We felt that they weren't so hungry, that part of the family was always rushing us to get through to get to the meal.
Right. Well, that is the purpose of the green,
Right.
right?
We made it more
and it-
elaborate.
right.
The fish
Um,
dip or, yeah.
And the green herbs comes long time before the matzah, right? So even you're doing it the right way, right? They did it that way too. To them, I think the error is that historically there was a time where people and Margaret, maybe this ties into some of that critique of the over ritualization and the over prescription that we were talking about earlier, is now people are like, well, my karpas has to be 4x7 and weigh exactly this much or be this much volume, and they forgot that what it was is salad. Right? That it was appetizer, that they made it symbolic, but it was also meant to serve like a flow of the experience, right? That it's not that you're supposed to only eat a symbolic piece of parsley, right? But that you're to make yourself a little salad of greenery to celebrate, spring and its redemptive power, and enjoy it, and to whet your appetite, right? That herbs and greens, bitters especially, get you salivating, get your digestion going, so you get hungrier. Actually, it makes you ready to taste food and to eat, right? So I agree. We do the same thing. For us, once you eat green herbs, we have a whole platter of green stuff, like and vinegar and a little bit of this, and like make a nice, make it nice. Radishes and endives and parsley and celery and romaine and scallions. It's a salad. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's not that you can't see. The Mishnah says, the language of the Mishnah is ad sheyesev, until they recline. And the first reclining is for the first kiddush. So meaning at the very beginning. And then you can eat, but all you really eat is the karpas. You eat some greenery to enhance the meal and to whet your appetite towards what's coming. Yeah, Barbara.
Many years we have seen published in the Passover guide that individual temples or anything do. It says, so you should have this done by this time and that done by this time and this done by that time. It would be so nice if they would explain and do it, because you're not eating because you're supposed to feel like a part of the escaping slaves.
Right.
And give us like 2 more sentences to have the explanation that comes with this. So if you have anything to say about anything Bethel puts out this year, add those 2 lines.
I will add them. It's coming up. We're working on that bulletin as we speak, because it's not too early to be working on Passover. And Barbara, I've talked about this before, and it does come up when we talk about this kind of thing. I think there's a few things that work there that I don't like about contemporary religious life and thinking. Part of it is this pedantry over, exactly how things are supposed to be, and God forbid you should explain it, because then you don't own the jargon and the expertise, and I don't know. I feel like it's there should be more explaining. There should be more conversation. I love the Haggadah, but I also feel like it's like a club. I don't mean like an exclusive club. I mean like a thing that you beat people over the head with. Like no, we have to say everything in the Haggadah. And I'm like, geez, like it's oppressive, right? I mean, like talk about liberation. When you get to dinner, like, oh God, I do feel liberated. No, that's not the point. The point is experiential, and if it's not serving the experience, then you gotta ask you gotta question the mechanism. I think we'd be way better off touching base on little things in the Haggadah, spending a lot more time in conversation and questions.
This business of not eating after 2 o'clock is new to me. I don't know. Maybe everybody else was aware of it. But
you're not
is new
supposed
to me, and I think that's an interesting.
Yeah, it's I'm glad, and you're not supposed to eat chametz past the morning, right? Early in the morning, but you can have lunch. Right? So you're supposed to eat lunch, but not anything after lunch, basically. But no chametz at lunch, past biur, right after you burn chametz, after the end of burning chametz time around 10 o'clock. No chametz, right? That's more a distance yourself from sin thing, I think. Like, all right, clean it up, get it out of the house early. You don't want to be like clearing out chametz at 2:30 in the afternoon on Erev Pesach. So yes, you could have it during the day, still in your possession, but again, we moved the deadline back to earlier so as to distance yourself. Cool. All right, y'all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful today.
Really
Take care
interesting.
and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.